Well, Olive Tree Media a few months ago decided what we wanted to do was to speak into the Australian community to answer some of the blocker issues for Christian faith in the Australian community. So we had a discussion about it and we realised that we're really guessing. Everybody has a lot of commentary on what the issues are in the Australian community, but nobody actually kind of has done key research on it. So we decided the first thing we needed to do was to do some research. So we asked Mark McCrindle and commissioned McCrindle Research to look at the Australian community and say, so what are the blockers? What do they think about Christian faith and what blocks them from Christian faith?
We ran a survey of 1,094 Australians from a national representative sample, and then we followed that up with 3 focus groups of non-Christians. So if we take all of these issues and compile them of those who in our communities are not Christian but are open to some extent to change, and we combine these issues and put them in order, what are the biggest belief blockers? Well, here are the top 10. Number 1, church abuse. Number 2, hypocrisy. Number 3, judging others. Number 4, religious wars. Number 5, suffering. We've got issues around money, outdated, hell and condemnation, the teaching on that, homosexuality and exclusivity.
I wasn't asked twice to do this. As soon as I heard about it, I knew I wanted to be part of it, and I'm glad to be here today to share it with you. Christianity, as you know, is a communication religion. We believe in the Word and the spreading of the Word. Furthermore, we are a translation faith. That is to say, we don't just have our Bible and leave it in Greek and Hebrew. We translate. We've always translated. And the whole business of translating the text into the language of the people is part of the genius of the Christian gospel. The first thing I noticed as a communicator is how ill-informed the audience is. My expectation of what people know is far higher than, in fact, what the research has indicated. I suppose the other thing I observe here is the one that will capture everyone's attention, namely the turn-off by celebrity endorsers. That's very interesting indeed. And again, I think it's cultural. I think the Americans tend to go in for that sort of thing, and Aussies don't. I can understand that. 4 things that I observed, all starting with F, of course I'm like that. Families. The transmission of faith through families, immensely significant. When I was principal of Moore College, I used to ask incoming students how they became Christians. Families figured very largely. If a person didn't have Christian parents, I'd say, oh, your grandmother was a Christian. Families, friends. Clearly too, I think from the research, knowing someone who's a Christian is pretty significant. Other research I've seen has suggested to me that something like 60% of Australians don't know a Christian. The third F, formation. How do we explain ourselves? And here where Carl has talked about apologetics, so I'm glad he is. I'm glad he's thinking about that. My own view is that the Christian faith suffered a monumental intellectual collapse 40 years ago. We've never recovered ground. The fourth thing is fearlessness. Friends, the situation now is not as bad as it was in the 1st century. When it all started, we're far better off now than we were. 30% of people say they're Christians. We are far better off than we were then. I'm not discouraged by these figures. I see them as a challenge, but I'm not discouraged by them. I think we have immense resource, immense possibility, and I'm very much a believer in the strength of the gospel, the transforming power of the gospel, and the God who is the great evangelist. And so I'm not at all discouraged by these figures, but I am informed by them and helped by them as I think of how to translate the faith in a way in which will be heard by the real people we deal with and not the imaginary people that I think we ought to be dealing with.
So the next thing for us to do is to continue the conversation, get people talking about what is blocking people from Christian faith, how do we interact with our community, how do we get the gospel out there, and keeping in mind that this is not faith by focus groups, it's not kind of just been a popularist movement and finding out what people want and give it to them, it's finding out what blocks people from hearing our message and being as clear as we can. And from here we'll develop the series and hopefully in a year's time we'll be back here celebrating and launching a fantastic resource for the church.